It was the 1970s and 80s, an era when America ran on horsepower. Factories roared, diesel smoke painted the skyline, and the country's industries were running on torque and raw mechanical power. In that golden age of industry, few machines captured the spirit of reliability like the Detroit Diesel 6V92. Born from the same lineage that powered tanks, buses, and heavy haulers, it was an engine built without compromise. Truckers swore by it, mechanics admired its brute simplicity, and competitors feared it. But in a world shifting toward efficiency, emission laws, and quieter progress, that same strength became its downfall. The engine that defined American muscle soon found itself on the wrong end of the playing field. This is the story of how the Detroit 6V92 ended up being the engine that was banned. The rise of Detroit Diesel Corporation. The story of Detroit Diesel begins in the early 20th century with America's fascination with mechanical innovation. Its roots trace back to the Winton Engine Company, founded in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1912 by Alexander Winton, an early automotive pioneer who saw diesel as the future of efficient propulsion. Winton's diesel engines first caught the attention of General Motors in the 1930s, at a time when GM was expanding aggressively into transportation technologies beyond automobiles. Recognizing diesel's potential for ships, locomotives, and heavy machinery, GM purchased Winton in 1930 and soon after formed the Cleveland Diesel Engine Division for large marine and industrial applications. In 1937, GM took another bold step by creating the Detroit Diesel Engine Division to produce smaller, lightweight, and high-speed diesels suitable for military vehicles and construction. What made Detroit Diesel special was its focus on two-stroke cycle design, a departure from the heavier four-stroke engines of the time. The company's first major success came with the Series 71 engines, launched in 1938, which would go on to power tanks, landing craft, and generators during World War II. Their reliability in extreme conditions earned Detroit Diesel a legendary reputation among engineers. Through the 1960s, Detroit Diesel continued refining its two-stroke technology. While competitors like Cummins and Mack were focusing on larger four-stroke designs, Detroit Diesel doubled down on compact, high-revving engines with exceptional power-to-weight ratios. They expanded the Series 71 lineup with multiple configurations, including the 371, 671, 8V71, and 12V71. By the 1970s, after decades of success with the Series 71, Detroit Diesel sought to modernize. The result was the Series 92 family, which featured the standout 6V92, an engine whose potential nobody truly knew at the time. The birth of the 6V92. The Detroit Diesel 6V92 was born in 1974, a time when the world was shifting gears, literally and economically. The oil crisis had forced industries to rethink efficiency, while the transportation sector demanded engines that could deliver both power and economy. Detroit Diesel, already a household name from its Series 71 legacy, responded with something that promised to change the game: the Series 92 line. Leading that charge was the 6V92, a compact powerhouse that became one of the most talked about diesel engines of its era. The name itself carried meaning. 6V for 6 cylinders arranged in a 60-degree V-block, and 92 for the 92 cubic inches of displacement per cylinder, totaling 552 cubic inches. It was a two-stroke diesel engine, true to Detroit diesel tradition, featuring unit injectors, a roots blower, and in many configurations, a turbocharger and aftercooler. These innovations weren't just engineering buzzwords. They translated into real-world performance that left competitors scrambling to catch up. When it hit the market, Detroit Diesel marketed the 6V92 as an engine of the future. It was a versatile, high-performance engine that could power everything from city buses and over-the-road trucks to marine craft, generators, and military vehicles. And it delivered. The turbocharged, aftercooled versions could produce upwards of 350 to 400 horsepower, numbers that were almost unheard of for a diesel of that size at the time. In its natural state, without turbocharging, it was already capable of over 250 horsepower, with massive low-end torque that operators loved. In buses, the 6V92 quickly became a legend. It powered General Motors RTS and New Look buses, as well as MCI and Prevost coaches, where its throaty two-stroke roar became the unmistakable sound of North American transit systems through the late 1970s and 1980s. Its compact size allowed engineers to fit it transversely in tight engine bays, giving designers more freedom without sacrificing performance. In trucking, the 6 V92 brought a new kind of muscle. Fleet operators who had grown up with the 671 and 8 V71 saw in the 6 V92 a perfect blend of modern engineering and Detroit reliability. It could run at high RPMs, climb grades without hesitation, and take abuse in the hands of over-the-road haulers. For marine use, it offered consistent power delivery and quick throttle response. Detroit Diesel's engineering philosophy was simple. Build an engine that could run anywhere, in anything, and for as long as possible. The 6 V92 embodied that spirit. With modular construction, it was easy to rebuild, and mechanics appreciated its familiar layout that carried over lessons from the Series 71. Parts were interchangeable, maintenance was straightforward, and the engine could be adapted for multiple fuel and emission standards. Beyond the nuts and bolts, the 6 V92 carried something deeper. It symbolized the effort of decades of American diesel evolution. It was the engine that bridged the old-school, mechanical simplicity of post-war diesels with the rising demand for power, emissions control, and efficiency in the modern world. What made this beast so strong? What made the Detroit Diesel 6V92 so powerful wasn't just numbers on a spec sheet. It was how it delivered that power, under any condition, in any role you put it in. This was an engine that embodied the essence of brute American engineering. Simple, loud, unrelenting, and absurdly capable. Yet, that very strength would eventually become its downfall. At its core, the 6 V92 was a two-stroke V6 with 552 cubic inches, 9.05 liters, of displacement, producing up to 350 to 400 horsepower and a massive over 1,000 pound-feet of torque in some configurations. What made it stand out was how it utilized its incredible power. Thanks to its roots blower and turbocharger combination, the engine delivered torque almost from idle. It didn't need to wind up. It surged forward with a punch that drivers could feel through their seats. For heavy-duty trucks and transit buses, this meant immediate acceleration, quick throttle response, and effortless hill climbing. In real-world use, this torque translated into incredible performance. City transit systems, especially in Detroit, Chicago, and Los Angeles, equipped fleets of GM and MCI buses with the 6 V92T turbocharged variant. Drivers loved it for one simple reason: it never felt underpowered. Even when fully loaded, the buses pulled away with authority. This is something no other diesel could replicate at the time. Marine operators felt the same. On patrol boats and small tugs, the 6 V92 offered quick throttle transitions that could mean the difference between maneuvering safely or stalling under pressure. Its raw, two-stroke growl became the heartbeat of American waterways. While the earlier Series 71 engines, such as the legendary 671, had already earned fame for their reliability and durability, they were products of a different era. Those engines were workhorses, steady and dependable, but they weren't built with raw, instantaneous power in mind. The 6 V92 changed that completely. It was Detroit Diesel's first major leap into high-output two-stroke design, engineered with the lessons of decades past, but tuned for a new generation that demanded performance. The shift from the 71 to the 92 series wasn't just about displacement, it was about modernization. The 6 V92 introduced improved airflow through larger ports and more efficient scavenging, allowing cleaner, denser combustion. Its V-block configuration made it more compact while delivering more horsepower per cylinder than any of its predecessors. The use of advanced turbocharging and aftercooling technologies allowed it to generate higher boost pressures without sacrificing longevity. The 6 V92 could be found powering everything from city buses to battle-ready APCS, from fire trucks to fishing vessels. The same core engine design that could be tuned for vastly different roles was a hallmark of Detroit engineering. Mechanics could swap out turbo configurations, adjust injectors, or fine-tune governors to suit the job, all while relying on the same bulletproof core. By the late 1970s, it became clear that the 6 V92 wasn't merely the next Detroit diesel engine. It was the culmination of everything the company had learned since the Winton days. A perfect fusion of compact design, raw torque, and unmistakable Detroit character. But its success wasn't far, as this engine's downfall was looming large over its head. The engine that was outdated, By the mid-1980s, the same traits that once made the 6V92 a legend, its raw two-stroke design, unfiltered power, and mechanical simplicity, had become liabilities in a rapidly transforming industrial landscape. New emissions standards under the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, began targeting soot, unburned hydrocarbons, and nitrogen oxides, all byproducts of the 6V92's powerful but inherently dirty two-stroke combustion cycle. Unlike four-stroke engines that allowed for more complete fuel burning, two-stroke engines expelled some unburned fuel with each exhaust stroke, a trade-off that regulators could no longer overlook. The fuel economy crisis of the 1970s and 80s further compounded the issue. Rising fuel prices and stricter efficiency mandates meant that operators from bus fleets to long-haul trucking companies needed engines that could do more with less. The 6V92, though incredibly strong and reliable, was not frugal. Its signature strength came at a cost: higher fuel consumption, louder operation, and the need for more frequent maintenance compared to emerging four-stroke competitors. By the early 1990s, the market had moved on. Truck manufacturers began standardizing around cleaner, quieter, and more efficient four-stroke diesels from companies like Cummins and Caterpillar. Transit authorities that once relied on fleets of Detroit-powered buses began replacing them with engines that met the new emission tiers. Marine and military users held on a bit longer, where regulations were looser, but even those markets gradually shifted as newer technologies proved both compliant and capable. In this sense, the 6V92 wasn't banned by law. It was banned by progress. It became a victim of an evolving world that demanded refinement over rawness, control over chaos. For Detroit Diesel, the writing was on the wall. Survival meant reinvention. The company began a difficult transition toward four-stroke engineering, developing the Series 50 and Series 60 engine designs that could meet modern emission standards without abandoning Detroit's reputation for durability. By around 1995, the last production 6V92s rolled off the line, marking the end of Detroit Diesel's iconic two-stroke era. The phasing out wasn't celebrated with a ceremony or headlines. It happened quietly, as the market simply stopped asking for it. Yet, among mechanics and enthusiasts, the 6V92's disappearance felt personal. It symbolized the end of an age when engines were judged by sound, torque, and endurance rather than emissions data and computer diagnostics. The engine's market impact and legacy. Even decades after its production ended, the Detroit Diesel 6V92 continues to command respect, but not as a relic, but as a living symbol of American mechanical audacity. From collector rigs to converted buses and marine restorations, its distinctive growl and unapologetic power have made it one of the most recognizable engines in diesel history. Despite being phased out in the mid-1990s, the 6V92 never truly disappeared. It simply found new life in the hands of enthusiasts. Throughout the 20th century, the 6V92 made its mark in almost every sector imaginable. It powered city buses that defined urban transport in the 1980s, in military vehicles that served in demanding environments, and tugboats and patrol craft that relied on its immediate throttle response. Even in the world of recreational conversions, particularly motorhomes and schoolies, converted school buses, the 6V92 became a favorite for those seeking rugged dependability and that signature two-stroke roar. Its appeal was emotional as much as mechanical, an engine that sounded alive, that felt raw and powerful in a way that modern engines, governed by computers and emission systems, rarely do. What truly cements its legacy is how the 6V92 embodied both the pinnacle and the turning point of an engineering philosophy. It represented Detroit Diesel's mastery of the two-stroke concept, an architecture perfected over decades since the Series 71. With its turbocharging and aftercooling, the 6V92 delivered astonishing power density, giving operators far more horsepower per pound than many four-strokes of its era. Yet, in its very excellence lay the seeds of its downfall. The same high-output combustion that thrilled drivers was incompatible with the growing environmental expectations of the 1980s and 1990s. As the diesel landscape evolved, the market began to favor engines that offered more refinement and compliance over brute strength. Competitors like Cummins, Caterpillar, and even Detroit's later Series 60 engines leaned into four-stroke technology, with electronic fuel injection and exhaust treatment systems that made them cleaner, quieter, and more efficient. These new engines weren't necessarily more exciting, but they fit the world's changing priorities: fuel economy, reliability, and lower emissions. The 6V92, by contrast, was built for an era when torque and toughness defined success. In a sense, its disappearance marked the end of the mechanical age of diesel, when engines were analog works of art, built to be repaired with wrenches, not diagnostic software. Yet, the passion it inspires today underscores how deeply it resonated with operators, mechanics, and gearheads alike. There are still enthusiasts who meticulously rebuild and showcase 6V92s at truck meets and marine shows, not just for nostalgia, but as a testament to American industrial character. The legacy of the Detroit diesel 6V92 isn't simply about horsepower or history. It's about what it taught the industry, which is that power has its price, that innovation often collides with regulation, and that even when progress moves on, some machines refuse to fade quietly. Lessons from this failure. The downfall of the Detroit Diesel 6V92 wasn't a story of poor engineering. It was a story of an industry changing faster than its most iconic creation could adapt. When the engine was introduced in the mid-1970s, Detroit Diesel designed it with one purpose: to dominate through sheer mechanical strength. It succeeded brilliantly. The 6V92's two-stroke cycle, high revving nature, and turbocharged design made it one of the most capable diesel engines of its era. Whether it was powering heavy-duty trucks, Greyhound buses, fire engines, or military craft, it embodied American industrial might, which was loud, strong, and unstoppable. The 6V92 was built in an age when fuel was cheap, emissions were an afterthought, and customers cared about torque, uptime, and dependability. In that world, a two-stroke diesel with 330 to 475 horsepower and a growl that could shake the ground was king. However, such a design came with inefficiencies baked in. Its two-stroke cycle consumed more fuel and emitted more particulates than newer four-stroke rivals. As environmental awareness and fuel prices rose, that trade-off was no longer tolerable. By the late 1980s, regulation became the great equalizer. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency began tightening emissions standards, forcing every manufacturer to innovate or die. Two-stroke diesels like the 6V92, despite their mechanical brilliance, simply couldn't meet the new requirements without significant redesign. The same exhaust flow that gave it punch also meant unburned hydrocarbons and higher smoke output. Electronic fuel controls and cleaner combustion were the new frontier, where old mechanical two-strokes weren't built to conquer. Detroit Diesel saw the writing on the wall. To survive, it had to evolve from its roots. Thus came the shift to the four-stroke Series 60, a completely new engine with electronic controls, cleaner combustion, and better fuel economy. This transition wasn't just technological, it was philosophical. The company had to move from a build-it-strong mindset to a build-it-smart one. And this was an evolution that marked the end of the 6V92. Yet, the 6V92's story also highlights the economic and industrial lessons every manufacturer faces. Power doesn't guarantee success if the market shifts beneath your feet. The engine was a triumph of engineering muscle, but a failure of foresight. Its immense strength, simple serviceability, and thunderous charm made it beloved among mechanics and operators, but those same features could not offset rising fuel costs, emissions penalties, and new expectations for efficiency. The engine wasn't banned by law, it was phased out by progress. The world had moved on, and Detroit Diesel had to follow. Today, the 6V92 is more than a relic. It's a symbol of balance lost. It teaches engineers and policymakers alike that innovation must align with sustainability, economics, and adaptability. You can build the strongest engine in the world, but if it can't meet the demands of tomorrow, it will be left in yesterday's dust. The 6V92 remains a legend, not because it failed, but because it burned so brightly. The Detroit Diesel 6V92 wasn't just an engine, it was a statement of what American engineering once stood for: unapologetic power, raw sound, and unmatched torque. But power alone couldn't outpace time. As regulations tightened and priorities shifted toward cleaner, more efficient technology, the 6V92 became a legend of a bygone era, not banned by law, but by progress itself. Its thunderous roar still echoes through vintage trucks, boats, and collectors' hearts, reminding us that strength without sustainability is never enough. A diesel icon gone, but never forgotten.